The 1920s is a time with an equal number of eccentric intellectuals and eccentric criminals, and sometimes these two worlds collide. The final months of 1924 are one of those times. Eccentric young artist Salvador Dali is just returning to school after a suspension and a small stint in prison, and as he does so, one of the most iconic art movements of the modern world is born. The surrealists have announced their manifesto to the world. Preceding that was predictable levels of drama and even violence. This is Between Two Wars Season 2, a chronological summary of the interwar years, where we cover the zeitgeist, the culture, the technology, the art, the sports, and much more in the era when, for better or for worse, humanity ushered in modern times. I'm Indy Neidell. There are a lot of headlines this season. The Second Jili-Fengtian War has left China in ruins, with tens of thousands dead and a bankrupt national government. Concurrently, the Kuomintang and Communist parties are growing in power, now seen by many as an alternative to the ever-feuding warlords. The Muslim world also has a new rising power. Sultan of the Najd, Abdulaziz ibn Saud, is gradually conquering Hijaz, including the holy cities of Mecca and Medina. There is no leadership change in America, though. Calvin Coolidge is re-elected president in the November election. Moving to Europe, there has been a Comintern orchestrated coup in Estonia. It fails, but it's a worrying sign of Soviet influence in the Baltics. Some positive news has actually come out of Germany for a change, though. The government has announced its first balanced budget since the Great War began. That nation did not raise taxes to pay for the war. But the country seems to be on its way to recovery. In a completely unrelated piece of news that will have no bearing on the future whatsoever, Adolf Hitler is released from prison as part of a general amnesty for political prisoners. Reeling off these headlines so quickly drives home just how much is going on in the world right now. I've said it before, but such disorienting change is always matched with disorienting art. And this season, a particularly disorienting young artist is going back to school. Salvador Domingo Felipe Jacinto Dali Domenech was born in the Catalonian town of Figueres in Spain in 1904. He had a complicated life from the start. 9 months before he was born, his parents' first child, also called Salvador, died. From the moment this Salvador was born, the younger Salvador was treated as a reincarnation of the older, dressed in his image and given the same toys. He was also spoiled by an overly protective mother and disciplined by an austere father. But his family was also culturally and politically engaged, and his father often bought artistic monographs for young Salvador to pore over. He became especially attached to academic art of the 19th century, which depicted idealized subjects from history or myth in polished realism. He took up painting at a young age, and in 1918 had his first public exhibition. He was just 14, but received glowing praise. A local critic wrote, "We salute the new artist in the firm hope that in our time, our words, our own humble words, will become a prophecy. Salvador Dali Domenech will become a great painter." In 1922, he was admitted to San Fernando Royal Academy of Fine Arts in Madrid, the finest art school in the country. He had an eccentric personality. He styled himself after the famed Italian Renaissance painter Raphael, growing his hair long and powdering his face. He also sported a long pipe, broad-brimmed hats, and a flowing cape. At first, he was a bit of an outcast, but by now, the harvest of 1924, he has fallen in with a bohemian crowd who like to keep up with avant-garde developments in New York and Paris. Dali has also changed his style accordingly, dressing like a 19th century English dandy and slicking back his hair. Last year, 1923, he was actually suspended for a year for organizing a protest against the Academy's refusal to appoint a progressive artist to the faculty. In May this year, he was also arrested and imprisoned for a short while because of his family's anti-monarchist views, making him a hero among his bohemian friends. He was released soon after, and this harvest is returning to the Academy to continue his studies. Beyond his immediate circle, he is still pretty much a nobody, but the movement he will one day be synonymous with is taking shape this October. The Surrealists now have a manifesto. If you saw the episode earlier this season when I looked at art movements of the interwar era, you will remember André Breton and his battle with Tristan Tzara and the Dada movement. Breton believed that Dada's meaninglessness made it potentially reactionary and began positioning himself as the avant-garde of the avant-garde. But he overplayed his hand and was left in disgrace after a mock trial at a Paris cafe. And that was a really good episode. You should watch it if you haven't seen that. Well, a lot has happened since then. Breton has been in open war with the Dadaists. In July 1923, Tzara put on a Dada show at the Théâtre Michel in Paris. Unsurprisingly, it was a raucous affair from the start, made especially so with the continued jeering coming from Breton and his followers. But things got really out of hand when one poet, Pierre de Massot, symbolically announced the deaths of famous avant-gardists like Pablo Picasso and Marcel Duchamp. Picasso was in the audience, and Breton apparently wished to defend his honor. So he leapt onto stage and beat Massot with a walking cane, breaking his arm. Tzara knew trouble had been likely, so he had ensured police were waiting in the wings, and they promptly swooped in and threw Breton and his cronies out of the theater. But one managed to stay in the audience. Towards the end of the show, he too leaped onto the stage and slapped Tzara across the face. The whole affair ended with Tzara trying to sue Breton for damages, but it never made it to trial though. Breton hasn't just been causing trouble in theaters though, he's also been searching for something new. Like the Dadaists, Breton rejects rationalism and wants to smash the boundaries of what art can be. But unlike the Dadaists, he wants to do this systematically and create something new from it. And he does this through the exploration of the unconscious. Breton became acquainted with the ideas of psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud when he worked in the neurological ward during the Great War. Even before he broke with Dada, Breton was experimenting with applying them to his writing. Freud practices free association, where he encourages his patients to voice their subconscious freely and without regard for coherency. Breton has tried to do something similar with something called automatic writing, letting his unconscious mind write the words on the paper. The most famous example of this is Les Champs Magnétiques, the magnetic fields, which he co-wrote with Philippe Soupault in 1920. It has lines like, "When shall we be able to grasp between our thighs this mammiferous monster, this Tibetan goat, which clambers on the Gaurisankar to the sound of metal flutes sweeter than your cry, O desolate shepherd? We shall see blood-tinged blotting pads and pastel blue faces. They will be greenly adorned by light and by plaited leaves. Their eyes are a pale gray shade that makes men tremble and women have miscarriages." Breton has been continuing these unconscious experiments since his break with Dada. He and his friends have also been partaking in seances where they supposedly put themselves into trances and let poetry flow from their mouths. Breton now finally feels ready to announce his movement to the world. On October 15th, 1924, he publishes his Manifeste du Surréalisme. You'll remember that Tzara's Dada Manifesto kind of just mocked the idea of manifestos and definition altogether. Well, Breton's Surrealist Manifesto does the opposite. It is a very serious treatise indeed, and even includes a definition. Surrealism, noun, psychic automatism in its pure state by which one proposes to express verbally, by means of the written word, or in any other matter, the actual functioning of thought, dictated by the thought in the absence of any control exercised by reason, exempt from any aesthetic or moral concern. Breton hasn't actually coined this concept. That honor goes to the late poet Guillaume Apollinaire back in 1917, who used it to describe writings by him and his associates as literally above realism. Another contender for the Surrealist crown is the poet Ivan Gall. This October, he preempted Breton by publishing his own manifesto 2 weeks earlier, where he accuses his rival of confusing art with psychology. But it is Breton who makes the biggest splash, and he will soon become the Pope of Surrealism. Alongside the manifesto, he's also founded a new journal, La Révolution Surréaliste, and even a bureau, the Centrale Surréaliste, where surrealists can research new ways of unlocking the unconscious mind. It is primarily a literary movement for now. But soon enough, nearly every elite in every medium of the avant-garde will be its adherent. And now, looking far away from the intellectual pursuits of European artists, America has been chasing its first ever public enemy number one. Gerald Chapman has spent most of his adult life in prison, but like Salvador Dali, he has cultivated an eccentric persona for everyone to see. He was born to Irish parents, but according to legend, speaks with a fake upper-class British accent and dresses in dapper suits and carries a walking cane. In reality, he is little more than a thug. Along with his ex-cellmate and mentor, the Danish-born George Dutch Anderson, they made a good bit of money with various cons and swindles, as well as bootlegging liquor. They also carried out armed robberies, their biggest being the hijacking of a U.S. mail truck in 1921. According to the New York Times, they made off with $2.4 million. That's like $38 million in 2021. Probably the biggest mail robbery in American history so far. They even got away with it for a couple months, but were eventually tracked down by the police. The two were sent to prison in Atlanta with 25-year sentences. But it was not long before Chapman escaped. Dutch Anderson also escaped a few months later, and the plan was for the two to reunite. But before they do, Chapman falls in with another old associate in Connecticut. This October 1924, they hit Davidson and Leventhal department store on Main Street in New Britain. Police arrive quickly on the scene, and Chapman ends up shooting one as he is making his escape. The officer dies 3 hours later, and local law enforcement declares Chapman public enemy number one, something the press nationwide picks up on as the manhunt begins. Unfortunately for newspaper sales, Chapman is captured this December, but his trial and sentencing will be covered extensively over the next year. He will be sentenced to death by something called the upright jerker, right? Which is kind of reverse hanging, where the cord around the condemned person's neck is jerked forcefully upwards to instantly break it. By the time of his death, he will actually be a folk hero throughout the US. Newspapers devote whole editorials to the details of his final weeks and days. When describing his final moments, the New York Times will write, "Chapman did not attempt to protest his innocence in the death chamber, unless such a statement was just the purport of a few words he muttered as two guards were covering his head with a black hood." There was a slight smile that seemed ironical on his face at that moment, and that look of scorn for society was the last expression that anyone saw of Gerald Chapman. We've already seen Andre Breton make a reappearance in this season, and so have other characters from previous episodes. For starters, famed writer Anatole France passes away on October 12th. You will likely remember that in the summer of 1922, he was placed on the Index Librorum Prohibitorum by the Catholic Church for his frequent satirizing of organized religion. One of the most infamous was his novel about an angel who got bored in heaven, moved to Paris, lost his virginity, and joined a revolutionary movement, something we all did when we were young. Luckily, other old characters have gone on living this season and are actually doing pretty well, quickly becoming the darling of American music thanks to the whirlwind success of Rhapsody in Blue. George Gershwin has returned to musicals. Lady Be Good premieres November 17th with music by George and lyrics by his brother Ira. It is the first collaboration between the two, and it gets pretty good reviews, if not exactly ecstatic ones. Buster Keaton is also doing well this season. The release of Sherlock Jr. in the spring was met with a cold reception and little splash at the box office, as we saw. But his latest, The Navigator, has done a bit better. Interestingly, the film features another reappearance. It is completely shot on an old troop transport ship. The same troop transport ship that was used to deport 199 suspected alien radicals to Soviet Russia at the height of the Red Scare, something I spoke about in the harvest of 1919. The ship was going to be scrapped, but Keaton's studio got their hands on it before that could happen. Released October 13th, The Navigator is Buster's biggest commercial hit so far, grossing $680,406 at the box office, around $10,600,000 in 2021. And one final note to end 1924 is from the world of sport. On October the 2nd, Argentina is playing Uruguay in an international friendly match of association football. Star Argentinian midfielder Cesario Onzari scores a goal with a corner kick. It's the first time such a goal has ever happened. Because Uruguay has just won the Summer Olympic title, it will be called the Gol Olímpico from now on. And with that goal, we end 1924. As the world is about to enter 1925, and the Roaring Twenties is already in full swing. In the first half of the 1920s, we've seen the rise of criminal empires, the beginnings of fascist dictatorships, and brutal outbursts of racial violence. But we've also seen technological achievements spread across the world, quantum leaps in the film industry, and the birth of the jazz age. And it's already been a very contradictory and even crazy decade so far. If the life and work of artists like Dali and Breton are anything to go by, things are not going to get any calmer. To see that episode where I talk about André Breton's earlier conflict with the Dadaists and all the weird art of the interwar, early interwar era in general, you can watch the episode Modern Artists, the Original Shit Posters. Link will be popping up here anytime soon. And remember that our Time Ghost barracks is full of Time Ghost collectible items that you can go and buy, and you can get my face or Sparty's face, or some things with no faces on mugs and t-shirts and swimsuits. And if you go to Indy's Tie Barn, you can get yourself one of Indy's ties. And your purchases do go straight back into the production of everything like this. Again, a link will be popping up anytime soon. And that brings me to this week's Time Ghost Army member. Still surviving Evil-Lac. I forgot that I was going to say that. Okay, well, thanks to Still Surviving Evil-Lac, we can make this kind of stuff because that is the major source of our funding. So please join the Time Ghost Army at patreon.com or timeghost.tv, and maybe one day I too could rent out a boat and film all of our episodes on it. And as Salvador Dali once said, and you might want to try living your life according to this for just a few days. What is important is to spread confusion, not eliminate it. Salud. Rioja.